and more than 100 different analysts from various industries, from FMCG to ICT to agriculture, and many more. And today we have the pleasure of having the titans and captains of industry in the telecom space. So welcome to you all. I'm going to spend just a short while introducing myself and Regenesys. So my name is Kapil Jagat. I'm the CEO for Regenesys Corporate Education. And a little bit about Regenesys. Regenesys was founded in 1998 by three awesome young shareholders at the time who had very good intentions around Africa and South Africans. And today they have a successful business school, which has got a range of other businesses in it, including a My Wealth business, a talent management business, and a health business. In addition to that, we've got the core, which is education, the business school at the center. We've got the School of Finance. We've got the School of Public Management. We've got the School of Law, which we launched just recently last year, and we are oversubscribed in that space. And it's an absolute blessing to be in that position. We've also got a digital business that does online qualifications, which is head office in Nigeria. We have a presence in Nigeria. We've dealt with some of the large corporates in Nigeria, as well as in India. We've got a presence and a campus in India. And the business has been largely successful in recent years. I want to specifically mention the Regenesys factor, the Regenesys difference, which is what we call holistic development. I personally believe that if you had to spend your money in any business school in South Africa, or most business schools, it's money well spent. But with Regenesys, we believe in developing the holistic individual, which is the human being. I think many people can be excellent CEOs, employees, and managers and so forth. But when you develop the human being, you can be the best at being a manager. You can be the best at being a mom, a community member, and even a CEO. So when the human being is developed, and we do that through intellectual intelligence, spiritual intelligence, and spiritual intelligence is not aligned to any religion. It's about having a purpose, individual having a purpose. When he opens his eyes, or she opens her eyes in the morning, what's their purpose? Financial intelligence, physical intelligence. So all these intelligences are intertwined into our daily teaching and learning methods. Ultimately, we believe in producing the best human being. So that's a little bit about Regenesys. Without further ado, I'm going to ask each one of you to briefly introduce yourself, and I'm going to go in the order in which I see your faces in front of me. And the first person I have is Juba Mashaba. Please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, Kapil, and hi to everyone on the webinar. My name is Juba Mashaba. I'm the Chief HR Officer at SALC. I've had quite a lengthy, experience within the HR field. Basically 27 years in various organizations, cutting across various industrial sectors, from steel to energy to FMCG to manufacturing, and now I find myself in the telco and digital kind of space. So I've kind of like gone full circle. And so it's been quite an interesting journey that SALC has been on. I think there's been a lot of comment about SALC's troubles in terms of performance over, ever since it's been there, frankly. And I've been part of recently kind of put together a management team to kind of steer this business in the right direction. And a big part of that has been to review the strategy and the operating model of the business, which has really been what we've been implementing over the past few years. And that involves repositioning ourselves from being a typical telco to becoming more than just a telco, which is now looking into how do we reposition ourselves to become a digital lifestyle company using our telco capabilities as the enabler towards that. And I'd like to share, I'm looking forward to share some of the insights that we've had in that regard.
Thank you, Juba. Next, I have in front of me Tracy Durant.
Okay, I'm making sure that my speaker is on. Is my speaker on? Yes.
Yes.
I'm not on mute. My name is Tracy My name is Tracy Durant. So I've been in the talent acquisition and executive search phase for 2 decades. So I've run a number of companies, i.e. 2, and then worked abroad. In terms of the telecommunications space, and also whether it be both a company that is setting up and starting up from the ground upwards, or has come to a point where they're stabilized and they need to grow. I then work with them in terms of how they're going to grow and which path they're going to grow. And then I also engage on executive consulting, where I work with individuals one-on-one in terms of where they want to take their careers. And it's a real honor to be surrounded by such a board. The most important for me is that you always wonder, the next person next to you has more qualifications and they're better than I am. And the answer is, it's never true. You are exactly who you are meant to be. So the value that I bring to this is specifically 2 decades of experience around talent acquisition. That's me.
Thank you, Tracy. Next, I have Vienna Radeli.
Thanks, Kapil. So I'm Vienna Regenesys. I've been in the talent acquisition space for 16 years, cross sectors. I've recently joined Vodacom. So I am new to Vodacom, literally been there 7 months. I was headhunted to Vodacom to get up the executive space in Vodacom. And I'm looking forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Vienna. As you were speaking, your voice disappeared for a bit, so if you can perhaps maybe check that out whilst we go to the next. I can see Justin Hughes up next. Go ahead, Justin.
Thanks and good day to everyone. I'm Justin Hughes. I'm responsible for HR for OpenServe. That's a wholesale network company. I've been in HR for 36 years in various portfolios. Spent a lot of time in the labor relations field, negotiations, CCMAs, dispute resolution. It is a side passion of mine. I'm responsible for a national operation, so we have presence in all the provinces, and the workforce that I currently have to supply HR support to is just under 6,000 people. Also, really looking forward to sharing ideas with this esteemed panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. And last, I have Dr. Zain Radia.
Hi everyone, my name is Zain. I'm an HR practitioner by profession, or by training rather, by default, whatever you want to call that. I spent the last 20 years in HR across various sectors. So I worked with MTN for the last 15 or 20 years. If you count my consulting experience to them, I spent that time across the Middle East and African continents, where I worked as the HR director, both at startups as well as in the operations. I also did a stint in the HR head offices, so at group level. And my most recent experience was with Samsung as the head of HR for Africa. So that covered the South Africa and the African continent, as well as Dubai. Currently, COVID brought lots of things to us, as it did to many. Following a family tragedy, I'm currently on sabbatical, so I'm doing a bit of consulting to multinationals, as well as I do some academic work at the moment. So that's where I am. I'm looking forward both sharing with you my experience of operating models of different kinds of practices, moving from pure telco into financial services, etc. And then more than that, I'm looking forward to learning from my esteemed colleagues. So I'm happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you, Dr. Zain. I know you don't like me calling you doctor, but I do. So let's start the conversation, guys. You know, the telecom space has been a very successful one over many decades. And coupled with its success came massive growth in the telecom space, and it branches out into various other sub-telecom businesses, such as internet connectivity and so forth. We then faced COVID, and telecom space is looking vastly different from what it used to 10 years ago. I think the businesses in telecoms perhaps are tweaking their business models to adjust themselves from being disrupted. And as a result of that, as a result of this disruption in tech and in your business models, the way you bring about people, the type of people you bring, and where you bring them from, and how they work for you is being changed. So that's the context of this meeting. So I'm going to start off, like I promised you guys, with phase one questions, very generic, hopefully simple, but then we'll get into some deep dive topics. My first question is, and I'm gonna pick out the person who's gonna answer it. So I'm gonna ask the question first. What do you see as the most important trends that are shaping the future of HR in the telecoms industry? What are the, let's call it, maximum 4 trends that you can see that are changing the way HR operates? And I'm going to direct this question to Justin Hughes.
Everyone should be pleased that I get picked on first, but look, I think from an HR point of view, the utilization of digital processes, of the systems that we have, and then to have the digital processes underscore what used to be traditional. So in other words, if we start looking at how the recruitment processes have changed, you can do recruitment now. We're on a Zoom call. You can do interviews via this type of technology. It means you don't have to tie people up all in the same room. It also then broadens your reach globally, looking for talent on that. Then if we move into the talent space, you can have real-time data lying on your succession planning, on your talent model, so that should you need to urgently put someone into some form of leadership position, that all that data is updated constantly, and it's live data. Then we could move from there to the training and development side, which in the past people would go to a particular school or go to, in our case, we've got training centers, and then they would be sitting there for maybe a couple of days being taught a particular skill or taught on a particular topic. These days we have online e-skill platforms, and that it can be done as and when the individual has the time to attend and to develop themselves, and also gives them a wider scope of where they would like their development going, which means you can start multi-skilling some of your staff, which if you're HR, you don't just have to be HR, you could go and venture into some financial subjects, you could venture into some technical skills that you get a better understanding of the business. And then I suppose just the general, I suppose performance management is also another area, certainly from a technology point of view, that you can have your self-assessment, move it through to your promoter to have an assessment, which can be moved through to a committee that can confirm these type of things. And then the mundane stuff such as leave, sick leave tracking, etc., also assists that. So I'd see that the trends are where you're utilizing the technology now to take what some of my team refer to as the kitchen work, to take that out of the slog, and that HR becomes really a case of being able to unlock the potential of the human resource.
Thanks, Justin. I think ultimately the point is, you're using technology to enable HR to be a greater contributor to the business strategy, and that's what I get from that. So thank you for that. My next question, and I'm going to direct this to Tracy, is around the skill set an HR professional needs to have in this new phase. What do you think? We've got a traditional set of skills, and we're going to need some future skills. As an HR professional, what do you think those skills are, and what advice do you have for would-be and aspirational HR professionals?
Currently, we're in a very good space. COVID was actually a good thing in that it forced the existing HR people to move their position offshore, so to speak. So they were part of the management team that had to figure out, how can I practically move my team? How do I do performance reviews? So they actually ran into, well, practically I can't do a performance review on a Friday, or can I? And so to speak. So they would have a management meeting during COVID, and then they figured out ways how to do what they used to do at the office on a Friday. So many of the clients that I'm finding now have already come into a situation now where they have decided way before we anticipated coming back to the office. They're doing things on a hybrid model. So they're creating hybrid models. They have then already created succession plans for the next generation to take over. So when they are interviewing for talent acquisition and HR representatives, they are asking them, are you able to work on teams? Are you able to do performance management on teams? Are you able to do talent acquisition on teams? Can you search outside of LinkedIn? Is it possible for you to find somebody on a Boolean search, which is unheard of? Mostly somebody would put an advert on LinkedIn and you get 200 responses. The HR executives are now saying, that's not how I got right in COVID, because within 12 hours I'd have 200 people. How would I know how to search? So yes, I can use my career page, but I want somebody with savvy. So they've become incredibly good on digital, and it's really funny, but they call it common sense. I've asked a lot of HR managers, how did you get this right? And the answer was common sense. It's come down to changing our company culture, and we've defined it, we've refined it, and then we've implemented it. And it's working incredibly well with them, because once they understand the company culture, you would know from a CV that it looks perfectly on paper. But if you had to do a video interview, which Tracy, no, it's not the right person, just based on a video interview, because they've come to understand what they want in their business, because it has an impact on the bottom line. And many of the companies, just in closing, expanded globally. They actually expanded into Europe and United States during the 3-year period, just by doing that.
Thanks for that, Tracy. And I think the expansion also speaks to perhaps shifts in various business models. And generally, your business model dictates the type of people you're going to bring on. And I want to pose this next question to Brianna. What factors in your space, particularly your space, Brianna, influences the way you bring on people based on your business model?
Right. Thanks, Gil. Can you hear me? Is it clear now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. So when we bring on new people, we've got a very rigorous process to bring work from. It's quite lengthy and it is quite detailed in terms of how we structure our process, in terms of onboarding new individual, or interviewing new individual, or talking to new individual. We're looking for top talent. We are looking for the diamonds in the mine. So when we go to market, we often look at the insights and we look at what talent is out there in the market, and then we obviously compare and assess who we wanted to interview and who we wanted to bring through. When we interview, we have a rigorous process in terms of we have assessments, we have a thorough interview case study process. We take various case studies, various assessments before we even interview the individuals. So it is rigorous, but however, it also allows us to identify top talent, especially on the executive level that are reach on. So when we're looking for top talent, we're looking for a significant amount of executives, and we find that the talent at the moment is scarce. So to find those individuals isn't as achievable as what it is for the lower end of the bands. So we have to really go to the market and find that talent, and especially we're on a female drive at the moment. So I have to go in the market, and there are so many that are and there is how do we accelerate in telecom?
Sorry, Vienna, I can't hear what you were saying now. I think your mic's gone a little bit softer.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yeah.
now I can. You just repeat the last 15 seconds.
So basically, when we go to market, we all come to from the same time. So how do we grow the email services in the telecom space is a question that I put out to Regenesys. How do you guys accelerate your processes in terms of MBA graduates that are completing their MBA? How do we accelerate them to leadership positions? Leadership skills are definitely lacking, especially in that area.
Yeah. Look, I think that's a good point. It's interesting, firstly, that you guys, you said you are looking for top talent, right? And the reality of the world is not everyone is the best at everything, right?
Yeah.
And that's a small portion. And this is a comment, it's not for any particular question. So a small portion of the world is the best at everything and the best at what they do. Most of the world isn't. And that's a sad reality of this capitalist way of business, is that you're looking for the top talent. But the guy who's not the top talent but can do the job is perhaps the guy who's inconvenienced. And it's the reason why we have third world countries. Just a comment. But yes, coming to your question on Regenesys, how we can support you guys. Look, let's call it, we're a production house, right? And we produce graduates. And we try, in all business schools, not just Regenesys, try and produce the best graduates possible. And they try and inculcate the best practices, the best case studies, the best exposure in all the postgrad and perhaps even a large degree the undergrad classes. And what can we do differently to make sure that we have more top talent rather than less top talent and take the average guy into the top talent area? Is partnerships with businesses like Vodacom, like Celsi, OpenServe, and so forth. Is when you tell us and you work with us closely, say, listen, this is the type of personality we're looking for. This is the type of skills we're looking for. This is the type of thinking we're looking for. And guess what? We are academic experts. We're actually a house of intellectuals. We've got hundreds of doctors and graduates who have multiple qualifications who can spend time working closely with you to understand what industry needs. So then we don't just produce graduates independently of a business like a Vodacom. We produce graduates aligned to what Vodacom needs and perhaps what the telecoms industry needs. So I guess the point I'm making is work together. When we work together, we can produce magic, right? My next question is to Juba. And this is particularly around processes and historical processes in HR. And now technology has come and disrupted those processes. And can you maybe talk us about how you have had to adapt your working lifestyle and your skill sets to this new way of doing work in HR? And HR is all about process, right? The process is the key tenet in HR. So maybe some comments from you, Juba Mashaba, on that.
Thanks, Kapil. So I think technology is changing everybody's life. Everything that we do, not just in the workplace, not just in HR, everywhere you look, technology is there upon us. And one of the big challenges that as an HR function you find is that HR people by their nature tend to be the kind of people that basically follow rules and procedures, right? That's our history. That's where we come from. Because in the hiring process and in the talent management process, we've always kind of like developed HR along those lines. That there's a policy for this, there's a process for this, and we stick to that and we manage that. What we're now finding ourselves is in a situation where the world has changed quite dramatically and is continuing to change. And that change requires a lot of flexibility and a lot of changes as you go along. You will not necessarily treat one situation the same as the other, but at the same time, you need to be consistent in how you deal with things so that you don't create disparities and inconsistencies, which then create other, unintended outcomes. I think that is the biggest challenge. So part of the challenge is I've told my team and said, we're in a different world. So you don't have to lose what you've always done and forget about it in terms of the policies and procedures. So we still need our policies and procedures, but we need to review those procedures to make sure that they're flexible enough to cater for the current environment. We also need to be able to be flexible in terms of how we apply them. And part of that, a big part of that has to do with our leadership. Because as we all know, that ultimately the people who own the people are the line managers, right? HR is there to facilitate. And so what we did when we implemented our new kind of strategy in SALC, I impressed on the CEO that we need to take the entire leadership team through an assessment, quite an intensive assessment process. And we took the entire executive team through that. But the brief to the assessors was, here's our new strategy. This is what we're trying to achieve. So understand that and please factor that into your assessment, because what we want to find out is in the current crop of leadership that we have, what are some of the things, characteristics or capabilities or mindsets or attitudes, behaviors, whatever it may be, that is going to work against us achieving this. And out of that, a number of things came up. One of them was, even though we're in a telco environment where we'd expect that the bulk of the leadership should be technologically savvy, it came out that they were not necessarily, most of them. The IT guys were, but when you start going broader across the rest of the business, not necessarily. The second thing that came out was that there was very little appreciation and understanding of technology and particularly AI in terms of what its impact can be positively or negative. And there was an apprehension in certain quarters around people not wanting to change the way they've always done things because people are comfortable in how they've always done things. So to address that, what we've done is we've implemented a series of programs, training programs, starting with the leadership at the top, and it's compulsory for everyone. We started off with emotional intelligence because that is the key that will enable people to basically free their minds from what the traps that they've always known, followed by systems thinking, because now we need to understand that we're operating in an environment where everything impacts everything else. And it's not just I'm doing my work and I'm isolated from what's happening in the rest. And then the last one, which we're about to roll out now, is an introduction to artificial intelligence that just gives people that sense to be not scared of it, to understand what it's all about and to see what it can bring. So that once you get the leadership on board, we believe that that will help to take that anxiety out of the rest of the business and create a culture more of people wanting to embrace the technology rather than being scared of adopting.
Thank you, Juba. I really like those topics that you have a SALC focusing or are focusing on. Do you mind, for the sake of our audience, to repeat those topics again, so we understand what you guys are going through?
Right. So the first leadership-wide program that we implemented was emotional intelligence workshop and training. Right. So it's a structured formal program. It takes 8 weeks to complete, and with different modules, and you write kind of like an assessment after each module. And your participation level is part of the evaluation. So basically, how you're interacting with colleagues who are on the same program is quite important, that we are not just learning, but we're also engaging with other colleagues, because the sharing of experiences and what it is part of the whole kind of makeup of the program. And then you write a formal exam at the end, and you have to pass, 80% minimum for you to actually then accredit. If you haven't passed at 80%, you have to repeat it, and it's compulsory. So that's the first one. The second one is systems thinking that we're about to launch now, which is then again designed to get everybody to understand that whilst we're operating different parts of the business, there's one strategy that we're all executing, and everything that we're doing is linked towards the execution of the strategy. And we need to understand how whatever we're doing in our respective areas impacts on that, either positively or negatively, on the achievement of that overall strategy. And then the last one is an introduction to artificial intelligence. So AI, basically making everybody aware with what is AI. Let's get there. What are these attributes? What can it bring to the business? Why is it important that we have it and embrace it? And how is it going to help us? What are the things that we should be wary of and so forth? Just so to get everybody to be comfortable with it. And then obviously, once we've gone through those, and this cuts across whether in HR, we're in procurement, whatever you are, everybody's going to go through those. Then once we've gone through those, then it's going to be a process of there's now deep dive into those specific other areas where we've got kind of tailored intervention that maybe required in the IT space, in the digital space, and so forth. There's not much more going to the next level of detail. But all designed towards driving the capability building towards execution of our strategy.
Thank you, Juba. It's very interesting. And for our viewers out there, Regenesys has spent a lot of time investing in modules and subjects around emotional intelligence, which is part of our holistic development, systems thinking, and we are almost positioning ourselves as a leader thought leader in AI. Most recently, we had a masterclass in ChatGPT and how to use the prompts in ChatGPT for various roles across all industries. So thank you for that, and I'm glad that we have an alignment there. My last question in phase one, which is, let me call it the easy phase, is to Zain, and I'm going to ask you to look into the future. Now, how do you see our roles as HR professionals evolving over the next 5 to 10 years? Because, this generation has been faced with unprecedented change since 2001. And 5 or 10 years doesn't seem like a long time, but we know technology, based on Moore's law, is going to change significantly, and we need to align ourselves. So Zain, maybe give us some insight into that.
I think that's a very difficult question in the easy section, right? So there's a few things. I'm glad that I'm following on the rest of the speakers, because there was some nuggets of content that I think is quite relevant. I think just to kick off, I think if we think of the quote by Alvin Toffler, he said that the illiterate of the 21st century is not those who can't read and write. It's those who can't unlearn and relearn, right? And I think that that's so important for us in this phase. And then, Kapil, in your introduction, there was something you said that I probably need to challenge you on and probably lead you on a discourse, is the fact that telco has not shifted because it doesn't want to be disrupted. I would rather change that lens. I think telco has shifted so that it can survive and so that it can be a disruptor. Because if you look at Europe and where they are, I think 2G and 3G is irrelevant. They don't even use it anymore. And therefore, our technology and it affects the way telcos play in Africa, because you look at our mobile penetration rates, you look at where telco is, we might have 4G and 5G, but we still have quite a large population still using 2 and 3G. So that relevance, that level of maturity of the different countries that we play with on the continent, if we talk just Africa, is quite pertinent. The other thing is that I think there's an evolution of the business model, because if you think in Europe, they're actually seeing negative growth figures, right? They're seeing 0 to minus. Where in Africa, we're still seeing in the 2 digits. Why? Because we're thinking ahead of the curve. We're seeing ourselves evolve according to being relevant. So the telco space has used its technology and has really evolved itself from just being a telecommunications player, but now has moved into the financial services space, has moved into the technology space. The likes of MTN are playing in the space of Global Connect, where they're writing this roaming agreement so that when you make a call internationally for certain things, it's as if you're making a local call. So there's all these underwater sea cables and things. But let's look into the future, and we look at things like AI and all the technology that comes with it.
We lost you for about 10 seconds.
Did you?
So you spoke about global, and then we lost you for.
Okay.
Was it just me, or did you guys also lose it?
I think it was just you, Kapil.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Thank heavens. So I was talking about Global Connect and all these underwater sea cables. And I was saying that we should be careful when we look into the future not to become fearful. Because that fear is what contradicts what Juba was talking about. Because to be emotionally intelligent, one needs to remove the feeling of fear. Because when we look at where we moved over the last 600 years, we've moved really from what we called PQ, the physical quotient, which is the work our forefathers did, like agriculture and those kind of things. And then from there, we moved into IQ, right? The IQ was really pertinent, and that was really the development of computers and technology that we see today, and we're still grappling with, even though AI is on our doorstep and the fourth industrial revolution since then. But the other part is that we've now moved into space where we come to what we call EQ or AQ, which is the adaptability quotient and the agile quotient. And, you know, when we look at our brain and we look at how our brain works and we look at our psychology, and we understand that we have probably about 5 brain waves as they measure them. You know, they call gamma, theta, alpha, and beta. But if I talk to you just quickly about alpha and beta, then that's the 2 where we need to be focusing. Because in the alpha state is really where you're relaxed, where you're on your second last day of your holiday, where everything is bliss, etc. And then the beta range is where we often focus in, is that where we almost under stress. You know the word deadline? That's a beta wave, right? It almost blocks you and stops you from where you're being able to think. So for us to be able to become emotionally intelligent, we need to focus and try to move ourselves out of the beta wave to the alpha wave and to the alpha state of mind. And for us to look into the future and to be able to relearn and unlearn and do those kind of things, we need to almost do something that's reprogramming, because we talk about thing about relearn and unlearn, but we really don't understand what it means. Because our minds have almost like 60,000 thoughts per day, all simultaneously. So we are moving between the space of the conscious and the subconscious mind so often. And therefore, when we are in the beta state, we have a lack of creativity. And there's a lack of innovation there because we are in a state of fear. Now, we must understand that when we're working within our African continent with all its inhibitions, with all its limitations, we want to look into the future. We want to engage the AI technology. We want to be more emotionally intelligent. But at the same time, we must understand that our reality is different levels of maturity. And therefore, we're moving at different stages simultaneously. So for me, when I look into the future, I see different things. I see us, one, moving the way we work in terms of being more creative. I see there's a change in leadership in the way we lead things because people are clones of their leaders. So if we want to evolve the business, then we need to evolve the way we think and create that capacity in where we're sitting. I think we must start moving from the state of where we want things to be stable to where we want to be adaptable. And I call this that we need really a human software upgrade. We need to change the way we think. We need to get into the space of where we, on an adventure, you know, when you read comic books as a child, you're in that space of where your mind is able to drift, and that's where you want to be. Because I think AI has the ability to mimic human predictability, if we want to call it that. But the reality is that it still requires that emotional quotient for us to be able to do different things. And I think that's where the future is going. So the business models are evolving as to how can you play in different spaces and move away from traditional business models. That's the one part. Then on the leadership and on the personal side, I think we're moving on a space where we need to move into a space of agile optimism, as I call it, right? We need to move away from where we're adverse to change, which is a state that we always get into, and move into that space where we're more free, where we feel that we more in that alpha state of mind, where we're more adaptable, where we know how to learn, unlearn, and relearn. We get into that space where we're able to recover, because when you're in the beta state, you are triggered all the time. And a typical example of somebody who's triggered all the time, if we're going into different people, you just have to look at Donald Trump. He's constantly triggered, right? And in there's very much no creativity in the way things move or shift. So we have some of those examples in our own leadership of the country, but we're not going to get there because I don't want to be assassinated. So I'm not going to go there. But I'm going to leave it in the conversation.
Zane, can I ask a question though? Because when Ukraine reached out to Elon Musk and said, could they use the satellites for telecoms? Meta has the same effect. They've got satellites available for telcos, so you can use that for the Wi-Fi. That is something that is obviously available already. I don't know the legalities around it, but I know that it's around the globe, that you can utilize various satellites owned by various entities to work with individuals. So with Africa, there's a lot of digital companies that want to expand and they want to use satellites as opposed to GSM. So I don't know if it's a huge issue, or if it's an issue of property rights, or if it's an issue of if you close it down, then you're going to close down MTN, Cell C, Vodacom, whatnot. But there's so many satellites. Even Elon bashed into one satellite of Meta and apologized. And because there's so many out there, don't you think that would be an option for us to just bring down the cost?
Absolutely.
For the average person.
And I think, we also hung up on the POPIA Act, which is this Personal Protection of Privacy Act.
Yeah.
But there's so many things that we consent to on a daily basis that we don't actually know we consented to. And I think it all comes back down to intent, right? What is the intention of the organization with which you want to use that data for? And whether you want to use or misuse that data. And I think that's where the brand strength comes in, as to how people are subscribed to a brand and what your brand stands for. But you make a very valid point, because South Africa is currently seeing this energy crisis thing, where it affects our base stations because we're still powered by electricity, we're powered by generators, you can't find backups, etc. Now, that's not a crisis when you move outside of Africa, because the rest of Africa, outside of South Africa, has never worked without electricity before. So they started from a point of zero electricity. So they've already gone past that challenge. However, what you talk to so aptly about Elon Musk is that that's where we want to be, because at the moment, to make any connection, you have to go from your mobile phone to a data center or to a base station and then reroute to the other person. With the satellite, you're going straight to the satellite. There's no electricity connection, and you're straight down to the other point. Because when we had the Iran crisis, we had the government close down all the networks, and Elon allowed people free access to his satellite, and that's how Iranians kept communication. So it's definitely there, and it's definitely an option that we need to explore for the future. But of course, there's all the infrastructure that goes with that, and there's the change that goes with that, because I think people have to have this trust. We already have struggled with the fact that we have to put things in the cloud. So ChatGPT-4, for example, can do lots of great things. But you can't use it as a business, because I led a global governance forum in Dubai last week where I was the moderator. And we discussed this quite at length, where you cannot just load your company documents into ChatGPT or into one of the AI tools, because all this is hosted in the cloud. And you have no control over the cloud, and therefore you have no control of your business plan, your structures, etc. So we must be very cautious as to what degree we want to engage with AI, because it's very much into a space of where, it's still very much in development. So there is this thing about, we follow en masse on what things people do and trends, but we must also be very cautious and apply our minds at some time. Because I got into this ChatGPT-4 thing, and it has functionalities and also has a lot of limitations. And we must understand that we should not always look at. I mean, we've started changing things in South Africa around the way we do HR, and we looked at employee engagement, and we looked at what was happening in Silicon Valley. And then I was taken by the French Chamber of Commerce to Silicon Valley to visit Stanford and Silicon Valley, a number of companies there, and Airbnb, etc. And I did a whole thing there. But I can tell you that we sit and we should sometimes immerse ourselves into why those experiences happen. What they do in Silicon Valley by having laundries and activities, etc., for staff is not because they'd like to do that, but it's out of their necessity. Okay, Google only gives you free coffee and Wi-Fi on the bus because the bus ride from San Francisco to Google is 2 hours. So we must also make sure that when we do something that it's actually appropriate and relevant. We must do that whether we're doing an operating model, whether we're doing our talent reviews, whether we're doing our HR systems, engaging our processes. Let's be relevant and make sure that we're moving with times, because we've so kind of spent money that's not necessary. I'm not going to take more of your time. Feel sorry for that.
Yeah, thanks, Zane. I think you've touched on my next phase. I'm going to skip the business model phase, and I think I'll challenge you on your first comment. Maybe you and I can do lunch. Challenge you, because us colloquial men on the street, we're still buying, and these are the facts. We're still buying minutes and calls from the cellular providers. So where's the change? But anyway, we'll get into that conversation later. Let's talk about AI, right? And Zaid, you mentioned you've immersed yourself into ChatGPT-4. I know I have since it's come about, and I've consulted with various AI experts, and we produced a few thought leadership pieces on it. I'm going to throw this out generally so anyone can raise their hand and ask this question. I'll also answer this question. Lots of people are thinking that AI is going to take their jobs, right? So let's be clear, that's not going to happen. I think the guy who's going to take your job is the person who knows how to use AI. So with that context in mind, what advice do you have for HR professionals, particularly in telecoms, right? And how to embrace AI? That's the question I have. And how can it help us? Yeah. So Vienna, you can go ahead.
I can run from a talent perspective and cutting to HR. So AI we utilize in terms of our process recruitment. It literally comparison to going through the normal process in terms of recruitment using an AI tool cover a lot of time. So it simplifies the process for us. We also have a chatbot. So instead of HR services coming through within the AI space, instead of having to answer people and bog down with different questions, we have an automated response that definitely simplifies our role within talent management and HR. So I don't see it as a point that we should be frightful of AI, but rather use it to utilize the advantage of what it creates. In our space, collaboration is one of the key responsibilities within AI. So we can automate job response back and forth within the talent people. It can literally go to market, find the talent instead of us actively doing research. So AI is definitely an advantage in terms of our work, and I see it as an advantage rather than a disadvantage. I'll hand over to the other panel members.
No, I think that suffices. I want to try and move. We've got 15, 20 minutes left, so let's try and move on. Another question I have on AI is, maybe this is a question for those. So Justin, you've got your hand up. Do you want to say something?
Yeah, I just, Kapil, just on probably a more broader area than just focusing on one aspect of technology being AI, is that first of all, from an HR viewpoint, digitization or technology or any of these applications should not be seen as being put in to replace human beings or employees, but rather to facilitate them to do their work. That's where when you're looking at these type of applications or type of systems that you have, if you're going to, in my view, if you're going to digitize a process because there's technology available to digitize it, but you have no reason or no understanding why you're doing it and how it assists you in obtaining the business objective, then you're just doing it to be vogue. But if it does assist you and support you to get your work done in a more efficient and effective manner, and it supports the business objective, then I think all this technology and change in systems and processes is well worthwhile. Just wanted to add on to.
Well, thanks. Thank you, Justin. My next point is, I'm going to follow on from what Vienna said, is AI is really there to support and enable perhaps greater productivity in all professionals, not just in HR. I have another comment on that. And this is perhaps for the neuro learning specialists. When we learn, we have formative learning, and these formative years lay the foundation for our abilities and our creativities and so forth. Now, if you're just going to use AI to do a job description for you, and it looks good and you sense check it, where are you developing yourself as an HR professional? And if you're using AI to do all of these things, and I appreciate the economies of scale and the efficiencies and perhaps cost savings, but what about the human development? What about us evolving as intellectuals? That's my question. How does that work with AI? Anyone welcome to answer that? Zain, go ahead.
So I like what Juba did. I think he was quite progressive in introducing people to AI, because as human beings, we are change adverse by nature, right? So I think the first thing is to take that and to let people understand what does this actually mean. Because we did the same the moment we got into the Gen Zs, etc. We said we don't want old people anymore. We became ageists. And we said we want all these young people with their new thoughts because they don't sleep at night and they work certain ways and we're going to crazy rhythms. But we must understand there's things like institutional knowledge that sits in older employees because you really create a lot of risk by just removing one and putting the other one. So I think it's a change transition process that one needs to look at. But also, I think this is where AI changes, is that from a business strategy point of view, it's about looking at the trends as to what AI could possibly do in the future. And that's where you change your business model so that you don't become obsolete in the future and you can work with the trend of AI. When it comes into HR practice, it's not about being fearful because if an AI can write a job description for me and I sense check it, well, great. Because that means I can actually do more of my work into the business partnering space, into that AQ and EQ space, which allows me to become more present to the business, which allows me to unlock creativity, which unlocks innovation. And that's where you use AI. So you want to replace the mundane. You want AI to assist you to take away from the transactional stuff. So I did the back office transformation across the 22 countries we're in. And we used technology to limit a lot of things, but we didn't really get rid of jobs. What we did was reskill and upskill and change roles because people will then understand that growth is not necessarily vertical. It can be lateral, right? And you can change and people just want to feel that they're involved. And so this gives you a lot of space in terms of where you really have a pyramid of organizational structures and people don't have growth. So AI does release those people from doing certain things so they can get involved in things that they love. They can have more time spending time with their families. They can get into that 4-day work. So there's all those kind of things. I want to give my colleagues a chance as well.
Thanks. Thank you for that, Zain. Juba, you can go ahead. You're on mute, Juba. It should be the catchphrase of online collaboration worldwide. You're on mute.
Yeah. Thanks. I echo what Zain has been saying, and I fully agree with him. You know, what I've been telling my team, because I mean, these conversations do come up. So what's going to happen is this technology going to come in now. I used to do this. Now this is going to be done by this technology. So what's going to happen to me? And my response to that is currently what happens in typical HR environments is we do what we need to do. We recruit, we're on board, we place, talent, and we manage. We assist managers with managing performance, we train and develop, and we do all those fundamental things that we've always done. We are not proactive enough, generally, and I'm now generalizing across as an HR profession, in terms of really being proactive around not only identifying potential issues that could impact on performance, but what are the opportunities to enhance performance going forward. So we leave all of that to the line manager. And I'm saying, this is where you come in as an HR professional. First of all, you can only do that once you embed yourself in the business. So once all the mundane stuff has been taken away by the AI, you need to go and embed yourself in the business that we are supporting, know it intimately, be part of that team, because that way you are then fresh eyes to support the line manager to identify potential risk in terms of performance and opportunities to enhance performance and bring in the necessary interventions, whether it's people deployment, whether it's multi-skilling, whether it's shifting people around. You can do that proactively instead of waiting until something happens, which is currently the case, and then only then HR comes in to assist. So I think that's where the future lies, basically, in terms of the repositioning of HR capability and contribution.
Thank you very much. I'm going to move on from AI because we've got such a short time in which to discuss such interesting things. I'm going to talk about the generations. And, you've got the baby boomers, you've got the Gen Xers, and you've got the millennials and the infamous Gen Zs. Excuse my smiles while I do that, but I've got my views. I think the least percentage of the workforce today is baby boomers, and for obvious reasons. And there's a certain quality and trait that they brought in to the business, right? And they are now rapidly exiting the workforce. You're finding that in private and public sectors, and perhaps in certain areas you can feel it. My question to any one of you who's willing to answer is what can we as a business do to make sure we retain that quality that the baby boomers inherently always had? Anyone? Tracy?
Certain companies have certain rules. You have to retire by 60 or 65. That's the rule. I know of a company where they had somebody who could handle a payroll of 200,000 staff, and she was 65, so they brought her in as a contractor. I think that's where HR stops being HR. They just manage stuff. HR people don't care about HR. They don't care about people. It's the one place you don't go to actually solve your problem, because they're so busy onboarding people and recruiting people and moving people around that they don't see the high flyers. And I think something if you can do during performance hiring, and I say that really, HR managers need to be performance reviewed themselves, because they need to actually see if there's high flyers, if there's really baby boomers brought in work ethic. Some of them they've got people that will literally walk on glass for them to stay at the organization. They've done phenomenal things. So when you see that their time is coming towards them needing to retire, have a discussion 18 months or 2 years before they leave and find out what it is. I met a lady who, she's so powerful on the telephone with the doctor's practice that I sent a message complimenting the doctors, because I found out that they were going to let her go. And I said, please, out of everybody, the only reason I come to your practice is because of this individual. And I met her recently and she said, no, they kept me on. It's amazing. When it comes to baby boomers, they do two things. They create solidity because they were always on time at 6 a.m. or whatever their time is. And they do skills transfer. They make sure that the young ones around them stand at a certain standard. And I think when it comes to skills transfer, get them to do the skills transfer. If you're not going to keep them on, give skills transfer, but give them the dignity that they're bringing. That's the one thing. There's a lot of them that are waiting to die. I kid you not, and they give nothing to the company. Those are not the baby boomers I'm referring to. I'm referring to the ones who love the company, love what they're doing, and just want to keep doing it. That's my 2 cents worth.
Thank you, Tracy. Leading on from this, we're speaking about the baby boomers, but let's talk about the younger generations. And for those, just by the way, Regenesys allows its employees to work to whatever age they want to.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, we don't have any prejudice or biasness towards anybody's age. Obviously, you must be legally fit to work. And you've got a value to contribute, then by all means you can. My next point is around perhaps reverse mentoring. You've got the youngest generation who grew up with a cell phone in their hands, and iPads and so forth. And then you've got other generations who probably spent their first 20 years of their life without even knowing what a computer is. And do you see, and again, the question is to any one of you who's willing to answer it, is there a fit between the two, and can reverse mentoring work?
Yes, it does. Sometimes it creates great conflict. It really does. But if you have a united front where they're coordinated as a team culture, where I myself, I don't know about the other team members, I'm sure they've had that, but I've had teams that I've walked into where you've had two generations, the one who had cell phones and the boom, boom, boom music going, and the other ones that don't. And it was a UK company that I was managing South Africans working until 10 at night. And what they had to do was the outputs, the KPIs were specific. And an idea was thrown by one of the team members who was not IT literate. and had to come up with an idea to throw into the UK to celebrate something. And she looked at her colleague who was in the younger generation and said, "Do you know how we can do this on a mobile?" And she said, "Sure, come with me over lunchtime, I'll show you." And in half an hour, she showed her how to create because they were handling critical care, how to create a video in half an hour. And that was an idea of how, if you're managing a team, irrelevant of where they are in the X and Y generation, came together and they put it together and sent it through to the UK for the care team. It was an amazing video, and it had all of the sound effects. But what impacted me the most was that the individual comes from nothing, doesn't understand technology. She didn't take offense. She put up her hand, said, "I don't know how to do this." Her colleague said, "Oh, don't worry, I can do this. Let me show you how to do this." And they came together. That comes together about the company culture. And that's not something that HR does. That's something that leadership instills, where they say, talk together. So I don't know how anybody else feels within the team, but there's a saying that is said, which says the fish stinks from the head. If you can't, if you don't encourage people to engage with each other and not make each other feel stupid, and that was the link with that team, is what's not to make people feel stupid. With some generations, it's different. If you're not digital, they would laugh at me, for instance. If I couldn't get something right, they go, "Oh, it's okay, Tracy, we'll get your laptop, give it to us, we'll sort it out, and you can just press send, and it'll look like you know IT," which is really funny. So, but it's possible.
It reminds me of a quote by Albert Einstein. He said, "If you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, you live the rest of its life thinking it's stupid." And we know fish don't climb trees. Okay, guys, my next question is around balancing the organization's need for profitability, stability, and the need for predictability to a large degree, and the balance between that and innovation and agility, right? Most of you guys are responsible for an income statement. That income statement needs to have revenue, it needs to have a bottom line, and that's how we get paid our salaries. But does that mean that we must exploit the customer with outdated products and services forever in the day? And how do we bring agility and innovation into our business via our people and not via some consulting company that's going to get paid millions to tell us how we should be doing our business? So anyone who wants to take that one, go ahead, Juba. I see your hands up.
So on that one, I mean, I think there's usually this kind of people draw a correlation between use of technology being a cost kind of having a cost impact versus innovation and agility. I tend to question that. Definitely technology does enhance things, but you can be innovative and you can be agile without necessarily bringing in the technology factor. So our approach, and I can talk for my business because we don't have huge budgets that we can play around with. So everything is tight. So when we talk innovation and agility, it's around the kind of processes and the area of responsibility that you have. How can you do things differently in a smarter way, in a more innovative way, in a much more agile way? And how do we make that part of the culture such that we now get into a situation where we say, we're all in this team together, this part of the system thinking kind of stuff coming in together with emotional intelligence, that we're going to hold one another, we're going to support one another because we're in this boat together, right? So that's the first thing. We're in it together, we're all going to support one another. But on the other side, we're going to hold each other accountable. So if I need to carry out a particular task and my conclusion of the task is dependent on input from a colleague, and the colleague is sloppy or not coming back to me, I have a responsibility to go towards that colleague and say, I need this. This is why I need it. And with you now delaying, providing this to me, the entire team is going to suffer because we're not getting there. So it's something, it's baby steps. We're not there yet, but it's what we're trying to drive. Because one of the things that we found in our culture was that people would not confront the situation where there was no collaboration or not enough collaboration, not enough support. They would talk about in the corridors and not confront the issue. And we're saying, confront the issue because that's the only way of it. But don't confront it in an aggressive, negative way. You confront it in a constructive, positive way to say, we've all agreed, this is what we're about, this is what we're going to achieve. I need this, and this is why I need it. Can we agree? And if you're struggling, can you tell me and how I can assist you to actually make it happen, such that we can move forward. And the more we do that, I think I'm beginning to get this sense of collaboration now beginning to improve. And that to me is our view of what agility, innovation, and collaboration basically means. It's the technology is just going to take that to the next level, but it's really about the interpersonal relationships that we're building, amongst our people.
Thanks, Juba. I see your hand, Justin. I just want to move on to the next topic so I cover as much phases as possible. And perhaps you might want to go on to the next one. I'm talking post-pandemic now. And, leading on from you, Juba, innovation, creativity, collaboration has led us to what we're doing right now, online collaboration, online meetings, online interviews, online everything, online one-on-ones, online performance reviews. And, this is my view. My view is the building that you live in, but the building that you work in has got institutional memory. Somebody mentioned it earlier, I think Zain mentioned. The older people having institutional memory. Or was it somebody else? I don't know. When you work and collaborate and do everything online, yes, I accept there are benefits, but surely you're losing the very substance of why corporations were successful. And that's the culture. And that's the interaction. We are social beings, right? So how do we take this what do we do in this post-pandemic area? How do we move forward? And how do we limit the use of technology from a harmful standpoint? So I know you had your hand up previously, Justin. If you're comfortable, you can perhaps take a stab at it.
Well, let me take a stab. I think most of us on the call probably have some form of a hybrid working model in place. And that would be, each company would have its own way of dealing with it. In our company, there are certain days of the week that you're expected to be in the office, and other days then you are working from home or remote, wherever you're working from. And I think it's generally working. To me, the interesting aspect of the whole online working, first of all, we are all thrown in the deep end. Nobody really understood. And then, how do you conduct a meeting when everybody's shouting at the same time? And there was a lot of resistance, actually, this working from home. People were saying, we need to be in the office. I can't do this. I can't do that. And 2.5 years later, and you say, come back to work for a couple of days, and you've got a lot of resistance there now saying, why should I be in the office? I have to contend with traffic and so on. But I think it's the social aspect of it that is what you've mentioned, Kapil. That it's very important that we do have that interaction. And I recall the first day we all came back, it was almost like starting anew. There were people you had seen maybe on video, although video, people don't seem to put it on. I don't know about the other companies, seem to put it on in meetings. But you're looking at guys and saying, well, you're looking still in good shape. Were you gymming or were you doing whatever? I think the hybrid working model is where we're going. And it helps, certainly from my view, it helps to even explore talent that you would not have explored pre-COVID, because you can now start even outsourcing a project to somebody sitting off the continent or deeper in the continent, where you wouldn't do that because you'd need them in the office physically. So I hope that answers your question. My comment I wanted to make on the previous one, and I fully agree with Juba that, but in terms of your ask of the financials, the income statements and that, I often wonder if HR understands their contribution in terms of the financial statements, and whether we haven't been panel beaten enough to be told we are a cost center rather than an income generation. But the end of the day, whatever HR does do ends up being in the income statement, because if people are not working, if they're not effective, if our systems, our processes are delaying conflict situations, etc., there's an impact on that bottom line. And I think that's one of the areas that HR in the future is really going to have a skill of understanding what is it that we impact on that particular financial statement. Thanks.
Thank you, Justin. I really like your point. I just, and I think we all have a consensus on hybrid working models. But if you walk in the corridors of many companies, you'd hear the employees saying, "Oh, I wish they'd just make us work from home." That's the reality. And I'm sure you guys have heard this. But we as leaders are pushing this hybrid. So, I mean, how do we get staff, particularly in HR, right? And how do we get HR to support this hybrid? And for staff to understand, there is an essential part of work is coming to the office. Because, like I said, we agree, but go down the passage here next to the water cooler, it's like, you know what, I'm more productive at home. And you know what, I can do this and I can do that. And that's what employees want. They don't want hybrid.
I don't think you can, sorry, I've jumped in, but I don't think you can hug your neighbour if you only at home. So it plays a role.
Sure. Thanks. You can go ahead, Zain.
For me, Bill, there's just two indicators that one needs to be able to look at. The one is your productivity ratios. And I'm sure people love living at home or working from home because they're not as productive, because when you can actually tell that you're overstaffed. So I'm quite an operational person, right? So I understand these ratios quite deeply, and I now to manage work that comes through and how much time people take. So you do those productivity ratios, which is the work the consultants do from KPMG, etc. They have a whole matrix on how they do it. So when you look at those, you can understand that when people are working at home, they deliver the same work they would have in the office, but they also have a lot of free time. Now, an organization needs to take a view. I'm happy to pay 100 Rand for this piece of work or this person, or I'm happy to pay 50 Rand for this piece of work because this person, one person can do two pieces of work. And this is why another angle why people like staying at home. And there's no wrong or right answer. It just depends on how big your organizational budget is on headcount. Is your most expensive operating cost. So it just depends the lens through which you look at it. But the reality is, I went to the butcher the other day, and while I was paying, I said to the lady, "Your computer's pressing X's." And she said to me, "Yes, it's to keep my computer alive so that they think I'm working." So people actually do this, and I'm sure lots of staff do this, right? I know people around me that actually relax on watching a movie while they're not working. So this is all organizational time, and this is shareholder money. But it depends how strict you want to take this. And an organization can either shrink itself, because it can now, and COVID has proven that you can do more with less, because there was a point at which you only had a certain level of staff working and the rest were like uncontactable, right? And you still achieve the same numbers. So one has to beg the question as to what happens. The other question is the employee net promoter score. So how would employees recommend you as a place to work? Now we all get this top employer thing, but it's, for me, I've seen top employer, how they do the assessment, and it's quite scary. So when I see people post, "I'm a top employer" on LinkedIn, I shrink and I shudder, right? Because sometimes I worry about the view that Tracy has of HR, which really disappoints me, that people from the outside see HR as a place that you shouldn't go to. I, on the other hand, believe that HR is something you can't do from your seat. You need to be in the business, be present and be relevant and those kind of things. Because I believe HR can't be done, it can only be done by heart, with heart. And you'll see that in my recent article with the IPM. But that's the difference. And I think those two ratios would make a huge difference in how we look at the value that HR brings, because HR doesn't have to fight for its place at the table. It already has a place at the table. HR has to just make sure that it delivers equally and is valued equally and it delivers the kind of value that the other business operating units that can be measured. And as long as you have a measurement and you can show those measurements, like your employee net promoter scores, your culture surveys, your engagement scores, all those things are actually working, then I think you can get away from the guilt, because we operate in a lot of guilt as HR. Thank you.
Thanks, Zain. And I think maybe perhaps why some of those views exist. I see your hand, Vienna, and I'll get to you shortly. Is HR has become a very scientific process. Everything's broken down. Every process is identified and defined, and perhaps it's become too bureaucratic in the processes, hidden behind the processes. And if an HR person comes up in an interview and they can answer all these questions and tick all the boxes about labor relations, employee relations, and HR practices and process, then you hire the person. So it's also the culture that you breed, and unfortunately some still have that view. I want to go to Vienna. You had a comment.
Great. Kapil, won't be long. So just in terms of hybrid model, we look at it as retention strategies, obviously. Other companies have different retention strategies in terms of hybrid model or individuals working full-time from home, especially within the IT space. The IT space, predominantly for the technology that they have at home, is a higher spec than what we would provide in the office space. So in the technology space, I was on a conference call last week globally where they were discussing 4-day week model. So never mind hybrid model, we're looking at a 4-day week. So working from a Monday to a Thursday and then off from a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And these are discussions that are currently taking place where innovation and key stakeholders are involved on actually authorizing a 4-day week, especially within the IT framework. So I wanted to obviously throw the question out to the panel members. How do you feel about a 4-day week? Do you think it is achievable? As a beneficial for the companies? I'd like to get your views.
Let me start first. I want to answer a question. I like what I do. So I'll be very bored on the 5th day. But that's me. I kept it very short. I see Justin's got his hand up. You can go ahead, Justin.
Yeah, I think the 4-day week it can work. The thing is, we must stop managing time and start managing output. And if you manage output, and Zain has mentioned, perhaps you should pay for a piece of work, and that might change the whole landscape of how you pay. But I certainly think a 4-day week, just a bit of tongue in cheek, I'd say rather give me the Monday off, because whenever you buy something and it doesn't work, it's a Monday product. So rather have the Saturday, Sunday, Monday off rather than the Friday. But I think it can work, and it's a case of changing management's way of measuring whether things are being done to not time but to output. And it's the same as I get more done at home, so therefore I should work from home, but just walk into your canteen and see how many people are having coffee. And every time you walk in there, which means you put yourself at risk because you shouldn't be there. But when you walk in there, it's the same guy sitting having coffee. So I don't necessarily buy that you might work longer hours because you're busy cleaning the pool rather than sitting at your PC. But I do think a 4-day work week can work if you manage output rather than time.
Thanks, Justin. I think the other point is it needs to be aligned to the customer as well. I would be very unimpressed if I phone a company on, let's assume we don't do Mondays anymore, and they can't answer because they're all still on the weekend. So, it's because the gig economy is becoming very real, and we need to refocus our internal abilities towards the customer. And I must say, my own personal experience so far in recent times with general businesses that I deal with, or as an end consumer, have been far from best. And it seems to be the prevailing culture in these, let's call it consumer-facing businesses that I've experienced. Zain?
You spot on, I think. And I think it's not so much of whether it's a 4-day week or a 3-day or 2-day week. It's about combination of what all three of you, Justin, Diana, and you were saying, is that it's about delivering a piece of work. So there is the customer experience element to make sure that your brand is maintained and that this piece of work is delivered, because they ultimately bring the value to the shareholder. And then, of course, I think it's, for me, this 4-day week is just an outcry of us being unresponsive over the years to being able to meet the psychological needs of employees and to meet that emotional quotient, to say that I need time to care for my family. I need to reduce my stress levels. So I think that whether you tell somebody you can have the entire week off, just make sure that we can trust you to deliver that and you can be available for when you need to do that. I think people will do that. And it doesn't really matter whether you come in, whether that you take 1 day or 5 days off during that week. It really doesn't matter. It's about being available for the customer, being available for your manager. Most importantly, we mustn't forget that we do work in an organization and it's not a democracy. You must be available for your colleagues if they require input. Because, I mean, I know an organization that tried the whole hybrid model, and said you can work anywhere in the world, but we're working on different time zones. And people then said, oh, I can't be available at this time because I'm in a different time zone. No. What is the base organization and what is the time zone which you need to be available for? So there must be certain boundaries. The human psychology needs these boundaries. And then I think it's about saying, being clear and prescriptive about this is what we do, this is what we expect to be done. And it's when leaders are not clear about their output and their strategy and what they're trying to achieve and about what value they want to bring to the shareholders that you have this ambiguity. The others is just, you don't have to even worry about it. So I think you can work 1 day, 3 days a week if you want to. I do insist that sometimes that people should gather because we are social beings by nature. Responsibility, occupational responsibility to make sure that the well-being of the staff, because people do get into, we are creatures of habit, so we get used to working in our pajamas, but we don't offset, and therefore better focuses on, we saw a lot of depression that came through over this last period. So when I worked for the Koreans at Samsung, last year, February, we were 100% back at work. Whether you liked it or not, and when you were working online, your camera goes on. So you didn't have a choice. They had those boundaries. But I know I've had people where and I've seen it even in the office, that they put off their camera and they're walking around having a chat and the training session is continuing. It's a wasted investment. We have to be responsible in the work. But that's not my 2 cents.
Thank you, Zain. Very, very relevant points there. Guys, I want to end with this last question, and it's about the youth. And I think that it's a big sore point for us as South Africans, which is the youth. But before I get into the question, I want to tell you something about Regenesys. We're quite a prestigious business school, and to get access to business school education is generally for the fortunate. Regenesys acknowledges that, and what we've done is we've got a non-profit organization. It's called Ed for All, where we allow students who qualify to get access to the business school education for as little as 500 Rand a month or 6,000 Rand a year. And this is simply to cover the access fee of the online system. So can you imagine a guy who's perhaps got very good results in the trick or has qualified for a bachelor's degree or an undergrad degree, can't afford to do it, and he's probably going to remain in that same vicious poverty cycle and perhaps generations to come after him? We are changing that, and we are offering these beneficiaries access to high quality education. And most of these guys are often youth. We reach out to corporates in our sales pitches to say, listen, this is what we have. Do you want to sponsor 10 students? And most often the answer is yes, by most of the corporates that we do business with. So on that note, I want to ask again a question to the panel. Let's talk youth, and we're at 23 minutes past 1, 23 minutes over our time. But perhaps our next webinar will be 1.5 hours, because it doesn't seem like we've been here for 1 hour. It's been such an engaging conversation, very interesting. Absorbing all of your insights has been really awesome. So my question on youth is, guys, we've got a problem. What can we do about it? This is what Regenesys is doing. What are you guys doing about it? Zain, I see you have your hand up.
I have to because I come from the township. So I'd be really doing a disservice to young people if I didn't. So I myself never had an opportunity to education. I might have a PhD today, but I didn't grow up with an opportunity to tertiary education. So I understand the value of education. And I must say that I know that Regenesys does it for all. I've personally sponsored a number of kids on that because I wanted them to have an education in some way in life. And I've also witnessed the lectures, so I understand the quality. I don't just want to put somebody into something. I'm very worried about quality. I don't believe that you give something to somebody just because it's second class, right? You should always give something that you would want to enjoy. So I checked out the program. So one is that we should try and not look outside for the youth development. It starts with each one of us, and it costs 500 Rand a month. And that's a worthy investment to see that child walk across the stage. I know what it felt like when I did for the very first time as an adult. So that's the first thing. The other part is about understanding the frame of reference in your organizations where young people come from. Now, I worked as an HR director both in South Africa and abroad, and this is where I appeal to my colleagues in the HR space. I understand that we have a BE quota. I understand that we have, but we're 20 years into democracy now, right? We have underprivileged children across color spectrums, and therefore when we close our eyes, youth are youth. And this is very important for me. It's very, very close to my heart. One of the two things we need to do is, I worked with a young lady on a project that I did a global project for MTN recently, and I had a young woman from Soweto who never been to Sandton in her life. She's on one of these global graduate programs. The other thing is that when we start bringing children only from a certain sector, we don't give them the exposure to the rest of the world. When I came into the workspace, I saw white people eating sushi and salmon, and I was just like, what's wrong with them? Why do they eat raw fish? Today I love salmon, right? But it's about that exposure of making sure that children cross-pollinate, that they understand each other, that they have exposure to each other, because this is how they grow. They need to understand what is it your world like, and so when they come into the workplace, like me, they're not shocked. They don't have to try and navigate themselves independently. We must create those spaces for young people to be able to gather, where young people can experience each other, where young people can share experiences, where a young Afrikaans white girl from Pretoria who's so scared of a black person can be taken into a township and saying it's okay. And a black child from the township going into Sandton and say, this is also your world. And that's where we need to go beyond just providing education, because for me, that is life education. And that is so much more valuable than just education that you get in the classroom. So I've insisted when I worked on the last project at MTN that all the graduates join my project, even as observers, and I gave them some work to do because I felt that they had to have a view outside of just making photocopies. Right? Because that development is we bring people into our organizations and they start doing menial tasks. We don't actually exploit the potential that young people have. I appeal to you, my colleagues who are in these corporates, please do that. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Zain. Really appreciate those comments. Anybody else I see Juba, you've got your hand up. Please go.
Yeah, thanks. I concur, Zain, with exactly what you've said. I mean, we've got an initiative that we call See Youth in South Sea that we've initiated, which is aiming to achieve exactly what you're talking about. So we bring youth from all sorts of walks of life, and we've got partners, some of corporates that are out there. We provide this avenue for them to say, come and join us and partner with us, and let's see how we can collectively. Because I think part of the issue here is that every corporate tries to do stuff on its own, and when we all do our small little things, it's got no impact. But once we start kind of coming up with something that can bring the power of the corporate world together, with a common focus around what it is, then you start having the impact. When it comes to graduates, again, just touching on that, like most other corporates, we do have a graduate program. And when I joined the company, I found it was one like typical graduate programs. Every department says we need 3 graduates, those 4 graduates, put them together, they spend time, they go, So I then looked at this and said, shucks, how many of these guys actually at the end of their program do we hire? And that to me was a telling point, because we hired very few of them. And that told me one thing, that we're not putting the right kind of emphasis and focus on their development. So the approach that we've now adopted is that first of all, we're going to do a proper job in terms of selecting those graduates to make sure that we're actually selecting them for real jobs and opportunities that exist in the business. And so they're part of our skills planning kind of process. And when they complete, they get into a job and they start working. And so by and large, the intention is to keep all of them. We've been trying to do that for the past 2 years. We've kept most of them. We've lost a couple, but those that we have lost, we've lost them to organizations where they've actually got a better deal. And we said, we're not going to stand in their way. We don't want to tie them down to us. Where they can get a better deal and it's more relevant for them for their development, we're going to allow that to happen. So that's the kind of approach that we've adopted, and I think it's working very well so far.
Thank you, Juba. That's really glad to hear that you guys are also doing a lot of work in this space. You know, when I think about youth, I think about youth in South Africa. I think about Mark Twain's quote on travel. And, you know, he said, travel is fatal to prejudice and bigotry and narrow-mindedness. And many of our people needed solely on these accounts because broad, wholesome, and charitable views on men and things cannot be acquired by vegetating in one little corner of the earth all of one's lifetime. And I think about the youth because they are stifled in a corner and they simply can't get out. And some of them just need a hand extended to them to enable this this potential of the globe, you know. And it's a reality, but it's a wicked problem that we can't solve overnight. But it's a problem that collectively, as corporates and organizations, we can tackle together, and we must. Colleagues, it's been a fantastic session with you guys. I'll see Vienna's got a hand up. Before I end, I'll allow you.
Sorry, Kapil, thank you. I just wanted to ask if you can pass on the details of Juba. Juba, I think we can partner. We've got a few corporates that we're currently running some programs. I've actually got the youth center out today, and they've actually been WhatsApping me while I've been in this meeting to give me updates on going to various schools and participating. We've got a lot of corporates involved with us that are doing the funding with ourselves, and we would appreciate extra help. So let's connect off from this conversation, and we can obviously take it further to help the youth.
Excellent. It's great to see collaboration coming out of this this webinar, and I hope there's many more to come like that. Guys, it's been an absolute honor hosting you guys. Very different perspectives, very intellectual, and I thoroughly enjoyed my time with all of you guys. On this note, I am going to extend an invite to each one of you to have lunch with me, and I'll be reaching out with you via email or SMS or something.
As long as you're paying for the lunch, that's okay.
I never say that this is a free lunch. I'll tell you what, today the lunch is on me, and I'm going to invite each one of you. Please do accept. But other than that, guys, absolutely amazing conversation, and I hope we can meet again soon. All the best, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.